Hi, this is Jeff Hamrick again at the Financial Analysis Program at the University of San Francisco, and I want to quickly go over both probability and critical value calculations for an F distribution or a Fisher distribution. So the syntax is basically quite familiar to that for a T distribution. You need to use the display command in front of the call to the probability distribution of interest. So in this particular case, if you do F-tail, we'll need a total of 3 arguments since F distributions have numerator degrees of freedom, denominator degrees of freedom, and a particular level at which you want to compute the probability area to the right of. So for example, suppose we have an F distribution with 3 numerator degrees of freedom, 122 denominator degrees of freedom, and we want to compute the area to the right of 1.8. This is the expression that we'd use, and what that command does is it sweeps out the probability mass to the right of the point 1.8 on the x-axis for this particular F distribution, which has 3 numerator degrees of freedom and 122 denominator degrees of freedom. Just as in the other cases, if you want to compute the probability in a left tail, you need to use this function a little bit differently. So for example, if I wanted to compute the area to the left of the point, let's say 0.5, this is not going to do it. That's going to compute the area to the right of the point, 0.5. And so if I would like to make that computation, I need to actually do 1 minus this expression. And that will effectively accomplish the computation of the probability mass to the left of the point, 0.5 or 1/2, for an F distribution with 3 numerator degrees of freedom and 122 denominator degrees of freedom. So we can also use Stata to compute the critical thresholds underneath an F distribution. For example, if I want to compute the cutoff value that leaves, let's say, 2.5% of the probability mass in the right tail of an F distribution with, for example, 30 numerator degrees of freedom and 500 denominator degrees of freedom, I would use this particular command in Stata. And so that's telling me that the level I want is 1.59. That to the right of 1.59 for an F distribution with 30 numerator degrees of freedom and 500 denominator degrees of freedom, we have 2.5% of the probability mass underneath the density curve. You have to make similar types of requests to get thresholds in the left tail of the F distribution, which is closer to the origin. For example, if I did inverse F tail and I used the same F distribution, but I typed in 0.975, this would give me the point such that to the right of that point, under an F distribution with those 2 parameters, there's 97.5% of the probability mass. However, of course, that means that to the left, there will be 2.5% of the probability mass. And so that particular value is 0.55 in this situation. Okay, so this is a little bit of how you can use Stata to compute probabilities related to F distributions, but also critical values related to F distributions. Thanks.